In 2024, Rhode Island has more than 1 million people squeezed into just over 1,000 square miles. That makes it one of the most densely packed states in the country. But here's the twist. It still ranks near the bottom in total population. How can that be? Rhode Island is the smallest state in America by land size. It covers just about 1,034 square miles, smaller than many counties in Texas. And yet, that's about 1,076 people for every square mile. But why so few people live in Rhode Island? Well, the answer isn't just about numbers. It's about space, history, and change. Much of the state is covered in water, which means less land is actually usable. And while it once boomed with mills and factories, those days are long gone. Today, Rhode Island stands as a small state with a big story, and a population that's growing slowly but carefully. Let's take a closer look at why. The tiny by design paradox. Now here's something important to understand. Rhode Island might feel like it doesn't have many people, but the truth is, it's packed. As of 2024, about 1.1 million people live in Rhode Island. That sounds small compared to big states like California or Texas. In fact, Rhode Island ranks 44th in total population out of all 50 states. But here's the twist again. It's also the smallest state in the whole country. It only has about 1,034 square miles of land. You could fit it into Alaska over 570 times. And because the land is so limited, people live close together, really close. It's the second most crowded state in America when it comes to how many people live in each square mile, right after New Jersey. That's called population density. In Rhode Island, that number is over 1,055 people per square mile. So even though it doesn't have millions and millions of people like some other states, it makes the most out of the space it has. So when someone says not many people live in Rhode Island, it's a bit misleading. There's not a lack of people, there's just not a lot of space to fit more. Even if you filled every street and every corner, it still wouldn't hold as many people as bigger states can. That's what makes Rhode Island special. Land that's water. When we look at a map, it's easy to think Rhode Island has room to grow. But if we zoom in, we notice something surprising. A huge chunk of the state isn't land at all. It's water. In 2024, about 33% of Rhode Island's total area, that's over 500 square miles, is made up of bays, rivers, and ocean inlets. That makes it the state with the third highest percentage of water in the country. This characteristic is largely attributed to Narragansett Bay, which deeply penetrates the mainland, creating a highly irregular coastline replete with numerous inlets and islands. This fragmented geography inherently limits the amount of usable land available for development, agriculture, and the efficient establishment of transportation infrastructure. And while this gives Rhode Island its nickname, the Ocean State, it also creates big problems when it comes to building homes, roads, or neighborhoods. Land along the water is often steep, soft, or broken up. While parts of Rhode Island are developed, the amount of usable land is limited. The high percentage of water area represents a fundamental and enduring constraint on population growth. It signifies that even if economic opportunities were to surge or the state's desirability increased, there exists a profound physical limit to how much the population can expand. This constraint necessitates either significant, environmentally impactful, and often prohibitively costly land reclamation, or extreme vertical development in already dense urban areas. Both alternatives present their own set of limitations and deterrents. This permanent, non-negotiable geographical feature distinguishes Rhode Island from states possessing vast, developable land, contributing significantly to why its total population remains comparatively small. Climate and geographic limits. Another reason Rhode Island doesn't have a huge population has to do with the land itself, and the way the climate is changing it. The state isn't made of wide, flat plains like in the Midwest. Instead, it's full of rolling hills that were shaped by glaciers long ago. That kind of land looks pretty, but it's not great for farming. In the past, people did try to farm here. They cleared forests and worked the land, but the soil wasn't very rich, and farmers had to add lime and fertilizer just to grow basic crops. Over time, many farms were abandoned, especially when better farmland became available out west, and transportation made it easier to move food across the country. But farming wasn't the only challenge. Rhode Island also has a long, low coastline, which makes it extremely vulnerable to climate problems. Back in 2015, more than 2,700 homes were built along the shore, less than 1 meter above high tide. That's not a lot of space between a house and the ocean. And the coast here is eroding every year, slowly pulling the shoreline farther and farther inland. Add in rising sea levels, stronger storms, and heavier rains, and it's clear some areas might not be livable in the future. Protecting every road, every sewer line, and every neighborhood along the coast would cost a fortune. And not everyone agrees on who should pay for it. So this isn't just about stopping new buildings. It's about possibly losing land that people already live on. In the long run, some families might have to move away from the coast altogether. History. To understand why Rhode Island's population stays relatively small, we have to go back to the beginning, to the way the state was first settled. In 1636, a man named Roger Williams founded Rhode Island on the idea of religious freedom. That drew people who were looking to escape strict rules in other colonies. But instead of gathering in one big city, they spread out into small, separate towns. Over time, those scattered settlements shaped the state's identity. There was no single main hub that grew large enough to pull in people from all over like Boston or New York did. Even as the state shifted from farming to trade and Newport became a major port, the population stayed spread out across the coast and inland villages. In 1793, Rhode Island made history when Samuel Slater built the first successful water-powered textile mill in Pawtucket. This kicked off a boom in mill towns like Warwick, Cranston, and Woonsocket. People came from Ireland, Italy, Canada, and Eastern Europe to work in the factories. Between 1860 and 1920, Rhode Island's population tripled, growing faster than any other New England state. But that growth didn't last. By the mid-1900s, the mills began to close. Decades earlier than in other states, Rhode Island became one of the first places in the U.S. to experience deindustrialization. The jobs disappeared fast, and because many people had skills that only fit the old industries, they had nowhere to go. Thousands left the state, looking for work in other parts of the country. The abandoned factories, known as brownfields, were tough to reuse. They sat empty, often polluted, making it harder for new businesses to move in. And unlike other states, Rhode Island never built a big, strong metro area to help catch the fall. Providence, even as the capital, stayed small, smaller than most other state capitals. That missing urban core meant the state couldn't bounce back as easily. So even though Rhode Island was once at the heart of America's early industry, its quick rise and even quicker fall left behind a scattered, slow-growing population. And that legacy still affects the state today. Not enough births to keep up. Now, let's take a closer look at what's happening inside the population itself. In 2023, the state recorded a total fertility rate of just 1.37, one of the lowest in the country, ranking 48th out of all states and territories. That number is far below the replacement level of 2.1, which is what a population needs just to stay steady. For every 1,000 women aged 15 to 44, there were only 45.2 births in the state. That's a clear signal. Rhode Island simply isn't having enough babies to replace its population over time. Add to that the state's maturing population. In 2024, about 19.3% of Rhode Islanders were over 65 years old, well above the national average of 17.7%. And that age group is growing faster than any other. Yes, it's worth noting that Rhode Island's death rate is relatively low, 735.3 deaths per 100,000 people, which is better than the national average. But even with fewer people passing away, the birth numbers just aren't keeping up. This creates what demographers call a natural growth problem. Without enough young people entering the population, and with more residents aging out of the workforce or passing on, the overall numbers can't grow on their own. These patterns quietly but powerfully limit how big Rhode Island can get. Migration patterns. When we think about population, it's not just about births and deaths. It's also about who moves in and who moves out. In 2023, about 31,599 people moved in, and 31,416 moved out. That's a net gain of just 183 people. Not much. A study ranked the state 33rd in the nation for relocation interest. So clearly, it's not a top destination for most Americans looking to move. A different report from United Van Lines said Rhode Island was actually the 7th most moved to state in 2024. Over 58% of their tracked moves were inbound. See, the United Van Lines numbers come from people actually using their services. Mostly folks aged 35 to 44, often with incomes over $150,000 moving for jobs or family. These are often professionals, sometimes with company support. The other data, like the one from Consumer Affairs, reflects broader interest across the population, including people thinking about moving, but who may not act on it. Between 2023 and 2024, almost all of Rhode Island's population growth came from people moving in from other countries. In 2023, 14.7% of Rhode Island's residents were foreign-born, a little above the national average. That shows just how important international migration is, not only to growth, but to keeping the population stable. Without this global connection, Rhode Island's population might start to shrink. People who choose to move here say they love the community spirit, especially in places like Providence. They mention good jobs, safety, strong schools, and healthcare. On the flip side, others leave the state because of high taxes, a high cost of living, or job changes. High costs of living and housing affordability. Now, even if people want to live in Rhode Island, can they afford it? Compared to the rest of the country, living here costs more. In early 2025, the state's cost of living index was 109.3. That means things here cost about 9% more than the national average. It's not as pricey as Massachusetts or Connecticut, but still, Rhode Island ranks among the more expensive states, depending on how you measure it. And the biggest reason? Housing. Between 2019 and 2023, the average value of a home was about $368,800. But by 2024, that number jumped to $470,378, with many homes selling for around $464,500. That's over 10% higher than the national median. And it's not just buying a house. Rent isn't cheap either. In 2024, average rent reached around $2,300 a month. Utilities also high, 137.5 on the cost index scale, well above the national average. Even in Providence, the state's biggest city, housing is more expensive than in places like Hartford, Connecticut. Rhode Island ranks high, 9th in the country for per-person property tax collections. That's something many residents bring up as a reason they move away. And when you add it all together, high housing costs, steep utility bills, heavy property taxes, it puts real pressure on families, especially those with average or below average incomes. That pressure makes it tough for new folks to move in, and it's a big reason why many who grew up here decide to leave. Job market and economic opportunities. Rhode Island's economy is growing, but not fast or wide enough to bring in a lot more people. In May 2025, the state reached a record 516,900 total jobs. But the unemployment rate stayed at 4.9%, higher than the national average of 4.2%. That means many Rhode Islanders still can't find steady work. Jobs are being added, especially in tech, education, and healthcare. Sectors like professional services gained 700 jobs in 1 month. But other industries like construction and retail lost jobs at the same time. So while the total number of jobs is up, they're not spread evenly across the workforce. Many people aren't working in the fields that are growing. The median household income is around $85,000, slightly above the national average. But that doesn't go far in a state where housing and utilities cost more than most. After adjusting for cost of living, Rhode Island's purchasing power ranks 31st. Wages look fine on paper, but people feel the squeeze. That's why jobs show up as both a reason people move into Rhode Island and a reason others move out. The state's economy is shifting away from old industries like textiles and manufacturing toward knowledge-based work. But the new economy hasn't created a wide safety net, and that keeps population growth low. Taxes. Good-paying jobs and steady income might sound like a strong reason to settle down. But in Rhode Island, the tax burden often cancels out those gains. Taxes here hit harder than in many other states, especially when added on top of already high living costs. The state charges income tax between 3.75% and 5.99%, plus a 7% corporate tax and a 7% sales tax. Property taxes are also steep. Estimates place the effective property tax rate between 1.23% and 1.53%, ranking Rhode Island among the top 9 in the country for property tax collections per person. And for people thinking about retirement, the estate tax is one more thing to consider. Altogether, the state ranks 39th on the 2025 Tax Competitiveness Index. meaning it's not seen as a tax-friendly place to live or do business. Some Rhode Islanders leave simply to lower their yearly tax bill. And for folks looking to move in, those tax numbers can be a deal breaker, especially when nearby states offer more breathing room. Taxes may not be the first thing people talk about when picking a place to live, but here, they're a big part of the story behind why the population isn't growing much. So when you add it all up, the high cost of living, the tight housing market, and a tax system that some folks just can't afford, it's no surprise that many decide to leave or never come in the first place. But let's not forget, Rhode Island's small population isn't just about money or taxes. It's also about space. This is the tiniest state in the country, and even though it's packed with people per square mile, there's only so much land to go around. With fewer births, an aging population, and limited room to expand, growth depends more and more on people moving in from outside the U.S. Rhode Island stays steady, held in place by the land beneath it, the waves around it, and a mix of history, geography, and economics that makes it unlike anywhere else. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the Ocean State. If you found this story interesting, or if you've lived in Rhode Island and want to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Don't forget to come along with us next time as we explore more surprising places across the map. Until then, take care and see you soon.